Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. With me today is Xandering. Work continues to try to confirm the detonation of what appears to have been a thermoelectric bomb somewhere in Ukraine. This would be one of the single most devastating conventional weapons you can deploy. We have a picture of it. Looks like a nuclear blast going off. We discussed how and why that is. It is non-nuclear. At this point, it looks like the location of where the video was taken was outside Polanka in the Charsky Oblast region of Ukraine. It's startling footage. We will show it to you. It's really remarkable, and it's a devastating weapon, and it's designed to suffocate and kill everybody in the blast radius, regardless of the explode. We covered it. There is confidence increasing at this point. We also have footage of a launcher vehicle that could have deployed it, and that vehicle was spotted in the area at the time, so there is an increasing confidence that that weapon was in fact deployed. Ukrainian officials are claiming that intelligence is saying that Belarus will now enter the war in earnest, fully committing air and ground forces within the next 24 hours. The Kiev Independent is reporting that as soon as 5 a.m. local time, which if somebody can get me an offset and find out when that is, but that's coming, because they're ahead of us, and it will probably be, we may stay live. I don't know. That may be while we're live. At 5 a.m. local time, a Ushuran 276 transport is expected to take off from Belarus with a full contingent of paratroopers for deployment in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine is claiming to have downed an AN 225, which is the largest single plane in the Russian arsenal. Presumably, I believe they have only one. And a lot of chop. We'll work on that. Okay, give me 1 second. I'll see if I have a suspicion I may know what's causing that. I don't know what's causing that, so we'll try to stabilize that in a minute. Do apologize for that. I'll continue the rundown. Hopefully, you can pause it a sec, and then when it catches up, it will. Yeah, okay, so something is, no, actually, I do have one way. We'll see if we can get that sorted. Give me 1 sec. All right. So, meanwhile, let's see. They are claiming to have downed Russia's, I believe it's their only AN 225, the largest plane in the Russian arsenal. Meanwhile, Russia has said that any act in support of Ukraine is now considered treason. They have passed a new law carrying a 20-year prison sentence. Interfax news agency, citing Russian Prosecutor General's office, says that, quote, a legal assessment will be given for each factor providing financial or other assistance to a foreign state which is directed against the security interests of the Russian Federation. They reportedly said that support would be, quote, broadly defined. And would likely include everything from financial aid to simply protesting against the war. This is anticipated to be a tool against protesters who are attempting to protest, especially in Leningrad and Moscow. We'll have footage of that for you in a few minutes. But they now simply protesting could include as much as a 20-year sentence. Numerous claims, credibly from within Ukraine, seem to suggest that Russia is indeed now targeting smaller villages that they can hold in the attempt to have any kind of claim to victory over anything, and are either capturing or in some cases outright destroying these Ukrainian villages. What we have is only social media accounts, but we have numerous footage coming in, appears to be credible, and is certainly coming from areas within Ukraine of what appears to be Russians utterly destroying small villages. Meanwhile, the United States has advised all Americans to leave Russia immediately. France has also followed suit. Belarus has, in continuing with sort of doubling down with Russia and purportedly now joining and giving full air and ground support, has now also passed a constitutional referendum today, revoking its non-nuclear status and paving the way for housing Russian nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, the EU says fighter jets are arriving at this very moment to Ukraine for their use in deployment. and defending the country. NBC News is reporting that Switzerland has said that it is, quote, very probable that they will be freezing Russian assets tomorrow, which is violating their long-standing tradition of neutrality. Meanwhile, we're realizing that protests in Moscow and St. Petersburg, of which we've seen some footage, appears to have been much larger than previously understood. The U.S. Embassy has reminded everybody, I actually already covered this, but worth hitting again, that the travel advisory for Russia is level 4, do not travel, and advised all Americans to consider leaving the country immediately via any commercial options still available. But has also suggested to them that they should have a backup contingency that does not rely on U.S. government assistance. French Foreign Ministry has issued roughly a similar warning, and it strongly recommended that all French citizens leave Russia, quote, without delay. They have noted that most European airlines, including Air France, has suspended routes over to and from and over Russia beginning tonight. Portugal has closed its airspace to Russian airlines. And the EU has taken further steps to isolate Russia, including banning them from soccer matches and closing airspace there as well. Ukraine has filed a lawsuit against Russia in the International Court of Justice, demanding that they be held accountable for distorting the concept of genocide in order to justify this aggression. Poland has agreed to allow citizens who choose to volunteer to enter the battle against Russia in Ukraine. Volunteers from Estonia, Latvia, Poland, and Georgia have been crossing into the border to fight as individual citizens, not representing their country of origin, on behalf of Ukraine. The UN Security Council, in a rare session, has voted today to hold a special session of the UN General Assembly tomorrow. India and China and the UAE have all abstained from voting. Russia dissented, but since it is not, since this was only I forget what it's called. I don't think it was like a special resolution. They don't get veto power, so the vote passed 11-1, and a UN emergency session is now scheduled for tomorrow, and is the 11th time that the body has ever convened for such a meeting. Valery Zalunsky, commander of the Ukrainian forces, says that between conscripts, volunteers, and reservists, the Ukrainian army now numbers roughly 261,000, significantly greater than the 180,000 invasion force. The London Financial Times, meanwhile, is reporting that while speaking at a closed-door session of 175 nations during a UN climate summit today, the Russian delegation apologized for the invasion of Ukraine. Oleg Anisimov said that he apologized, quote, on behalf of all Russians who are not able to prevent this conflict. All of those who know what is happening failed to find any justification for this attack against Ukraine. Again, that is the head of the Russian delegation at a closed-door UN climate summit earlier today. Right now, protests are, in fact, increasing worldwide. Berlin was anticipating 20,000 in their... all right. Thank you. Was anticipating 20,000 in their protests, and instead had more than 100 anti-war protesters in the streets of Berlin. Turkey is signaling that it is considering blocking Russian warships from entering the straits. The country's foreign minister said that they are now considering the invasion of Ukraine to be a war, which gives Turkey the right to prevent warships from crossing into the Black Sea. Pursuant to a 1936 convention, the Montreux Convention, I think is how it's pronounced. They have yet to close the strait, but they are echoing legal language required to close the strait under Article 19 of the convention. Italy has suspended all institutional relationships between Rome and Moscow, including the Italo-Russian Business Committee. We'll get into that in a little bit. Ireland is joining the EU and other countries in calling for Ukraine to be admitted to the European Union as quickly as possible. Poland, Slovenia, and Lithuania have also said that they would support the Ukraine's application. Meanwhile, Kosovo is now asking that their application to NATO be fast-tracked, reminding people that, quote, accelerating Kosovo's membership into NATO will have a permanent base of American forces and is an immediate need to guarantee peace, security, and stability in the Western Balkans. Despite being recognized by more than 110 countries, Kosovo is not yet a UN member, blocked by the Russian objections. Anonymous is claiming to have attacked the Belarus railway system and claims to have successfully disabled it. Intelligence reports and a Belarus paper appears to have confirmed that they have lost all control of their automated systems and have switched to manual operation. However, the loss of efficiency and lack of people prepared to use this on manual appears to have at least temporarily paralyzed Minsk and Orsha railroad hubs. Joining us now also is Commander McMillan. Commander McMillan and is Andrew. Thank you both for joining us. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing fine.
Right,
doing lovely.
Lovely. I know that's basically the sentiment of the world. So that is our basic rundown, I think, so far. Yeah, that's a lot to cover. We do believe at this point, we reported earlier on a very large column heading straight to Kiev. We don't know if that column plans on attacking or not. Putin has signaled that he's willing to negotiate, and apparently there is a negotiation set for between Ukrainian and Russian officials at the border of Jesus, Bella. Oh, now my brain is is slowly frying. Belarus, however, that was originally supposed to be in Belarus, and the Ukrainian president said, "I'm not going in there," which I think was probably a good idea. But
FDR visits Berlin in '44. Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I know. So I see Admiral Akbar going, "It's a trap." They're gonna apparently meet at the border, and given this, it's like if they're honest about negotiating peace. So, Commander, we've had a couple of questions about this. It seems to me now two Russian oligarchs have publicly come out and spoken against this. The Russian delegation at the climate conference has said that this is unjustifiable. It appears that the protests against Putin are larger than we had anticipated. Nonetheless, he does appear to have gotten Belarus to now up the ante and come in full on the side of Russia. He must be feeling the pressure to stop this. There was an article, I think it was in the London Financial Times, about what would it take for an actual revolution of some kind in Russia, and the thinking that it may actually be headed in that direction if Putin's not careful. Nonetheless, nobody has any idea what he's going to do. That column is headed towards the capital. I don't know where it is, and it looks like they're going to make a major. It looks like they all but took Kharkiv briefly, and it has been restored to complete Ukrainian control. What are we looking at?
Well, I've seen at least one news story that mentioned something like 6,000 plus Russian protesters have been arrested. And I'm wondering, where do you keep all those people? I think he's figuring out fairly quickly that he's on pretty thin ice. There's talk that Belarus has changed its constitution to allow nuclear weapons to be deployed within their country. Supposedly, the Belarusians have also promised to commit a unit, and my guess would be a brigade-sized unit of airborne forces to help the Russians in their operations. So he's getting desperate. He's getting help from various other autocrats, but for the most part, the majority of the free world is saying, no, don't think so, dude. And I think when the banks open on Monday and they suddenly find out that you can't get money out of your bank anymore, a lot of Russian people are going to be thoroughly pissed.
Gentlemen, I've disabled the internal camera. That is the Oh, and Maudi's going to be joining us presently. I've disabled the internal camera. This is just because we seem to be having some bandwidth issues, so I'm going to conserve the bandwidth. You guys will no longer be able to see the show on this side. We're still connected. You're still live, but the internal camera's been disabled. Maudi, welcome. I'll get the chat up for you in a sec because that isn't up yet, but we have Commander McMillan and Isandring with us. I've heard some people say that basically shit's going to go to hell in a handbasket over there when they realize there are now serious economic consequences to the average Russian for this invasion. It's at least 6,000 arrested is what it sounds like, and the protests that I've seen. So I want to show a couple of pictures. And by the way, actually, I am going to turn the camera back on for this because I think we're going to need you to see this if you haven't seen the footage. First of all, we are going to show this is a protest in Moscow, far bigger than reported, and this was 3 days ago. It's taken this long for this footage to come out. That looks like several hundred people at least. We also have the detonation of this weapon. Now, this would be the Thermo-Arabic. I think it goes under a couple of different names. I'm going to
Thermobaric. It's effectively what we used to call a fuel air explosive.
All right, which is designed to basically suck all the air out of the region and essentially do catastrophic damage to. Okay. So I'm going to turn the camera back on for this. And this is the image that we have. This location has been confirmed. This was recorded in Ukraine. We have the location. That's the image of what that looks like, actually, according to Google Maps, is up. This has not been confirmed yet.
Ох, ёб твою мать, нахуй! Давай. Ебал я его!
Despite how terrifying that looks, that the consensus is that was one of those detonations, which is still a conventional weapon, but it's ostensibly one of the strongest, short of, I think, Moab, one of the strongest conventional weapons available. So, McMillan, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as I said the last time we spoke, I think he's getting desperate. I think he's decided that since you can't take Kiev through a coup de main, which is what he was intending to do, it's now going to suffer the same fate that Grozny and Chechnya did. They're going to flatten the city, and they don't care about civilian casualties. They don't care about destruction of, property. It's just kill everybody, destroy everything, take the city so you can declare victory.
And now they're going for Kharkiv, which is the second largest city, ostensibly, so at least they have victory somewhere. Is that roughly accurate?
I think that's kind of the case, yeah.
All right. Maudi, any thoughts? How are you? I just realized I don't think I got that up for you. I'll get that now.
I'm doing well. I'm just trying to take in the news. There's so many different things happening. Did I hear you correctly in that, you're thinking that, and this is Commander McMillan, you think that Putin's getting desperate? Because I was listening to a news report earlier today, and there was an analyst that made a similar comment about carpet bombing. He'll do anything to not win. He's not going to take an L. He's not going to look like that on the world stage. Is that similar or in line with what you're saying?
Yeah,
Side chat. I need you to get involved in this side chat. Like, do you disagree or agree with this? No, because they're brilliant people. So
right. So my thinking is that he has a situation going where increasingly he's seeing domestic opposition, both from oligarchs. We know at least 2 oligarchs and several high-level organizations that are overseas doing negotiations are all kind of turning on him and saying, no, this was a bad idea, we don't condone this, etc. And I think he needs to have something he can lay on the table and say, look, I succeeded, because in the Russian mindset and psyche of government, if you back down, it's saying that you're ineffectual, that you're weak, and your political enemies will eliminate you. And I don't mean vote you out of office. Oh, look, there's a wood outside Moscow that has lots of curious divots in it where things might have been buried at one time.
Curious divot, precariously placed mounds of dirt. So that's another question as to whether, and I'd like your input on this as well. Nick, was there something that you were going to say that I interrupted?
No, I was going to. For a second, I thought he was actually talking about a gallows, and I was curious if whether that gallows is being erected outside of Moscow or outside on the Capitol steps. But continue.
No, I'm referring to back in the Stalin's purge period. They used to drive people out to the outskirts. There's some forest, and I can't remember the name of it. It's fairly well known, but they take them out into the forest and shoot them and bury them in shallow graves. And even today, they're still digging up people that were just disappeared.
My Russian teacher, his father, my Russian teacher was alive during that time. He remembers his father was saved by having had a heart attack. His father was ordered to meet in Red Square the next day, and anyone who was ordered to go to Red Square, you never came back alive. He had a heart attack, was in the hospital, and sure enough, the next day, a whole bunch of people were executed in Red Square. But he was in the hospital, so they didn't shoot him, and they never got around to coming back and asking him to show up again. So, yeah, fun times. All right, so anyways, I apologize. I do believe I interrupted you. You were saying...
I had a question about the balance of power and or leverage between Putin and the oligarchs, because I know that some people are saying the oligarchs have him under their thumb, and others saying that he has them under their thumb. And then I've also heard the middle road, which is normally, as a rule of thumb, he has them. Let me stop using the word thumb.
Mixing
in
metaphors.
General, in broad strokes, I'm going to start using all the other fingers so I can make 10 whole points now. So, in general, it is the case that Putin has the leverage, but things have changed recently such that his leverage is waning and not necessarily sustainable. So now it looks like the tables are potentially turned. Should the oligarchs want to apply pressure, they're in a better position to do it. So or do you have an opinion about this? That is
Yeah,
either,
I do.
or any three of those or something different?
First off, I think it's important to note that there are essentially two levels of oligarchs. There is to bring it back to an analogy from the Soviet era, there's the Central Committee. These are the guys who are the big power brokers. They're the inner circle that Putin works with. They are not his peers, but they're on that level. They have all largely divested themselves of foreign entanglements, and all their wealth is interior to Russia. It's the guy, who controls Gazprom and things like that. They're not going to be as adversely impacted as the other tier of oligarchs, and they have lots of connections outside. And as these sanctions hit, they're going to be the hardest impacted. So they're the ones that are going to try to exert power. But they have far less power than that inner circle. Does this make sense to you?
It does. So yeah. I'm gonna try to paraphrase what you said just to make sure I do, and also just making sure that everyone else who's listening has an opportunity to wrap their heads around it. So based on the two different levels that you were talking about, one has more connections outside, and they're the ones that are going to get more screwed with the sanctions that are happening and want to apply the pressure, as compared to the inner circle tier, where they're more insulated. So for instance, when the Soviet Union broke apart, there were some people that were able to just take over what the state was running as far as utilities and things went. And those, it sounds like those are the people you're talking about, have the oligarchies, is that plural for oligarchy? The central, the core version, that really aren't going to be impacted. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. He being Putin, I think, is in danger of getting ousted. The moment that inner group, just like it was under the Soviets, when the inner core, the Central Committee, begin to lose confidence in your abilities to accomplish what they want to accomplish, and B, to maintain control over them. If they see weakness, that's when they say, hey, I could be the guy sitting in the big chair tonight. Now, Putin does have solid control over the inner security apparatus that controls public safety. That used to be KGB, and now it's the Ministry of State Security or whatever. Mm-hmm. But they are the ones that will maintain order. If you start seeing those guys letting the protesters walk through their ranks, it's very equivalent to what happened in 1917 that established the Kerensky government and brought down the czars, because when the security forces start saying, we're not going to turn our guns on the people, then he's really lost it, and potentially the oligarchs around him have lost it too. And I suspect. Go ahead.
No, I'll finish that thought, and then Marty, you should be up if you want to hit that link. Should be working. If not, let me know. Yeah, you were saying.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if the inner circle sees that they're potentially going to be thrown out with the bathwater, so to speak, that's when they'll say, he's got to go. And there will be a very quiet internal reshuffling of chairs at the musical chairs game. And then somebody will stand up and say, we'll talk to the West and let's see what we can negotiate to get out of this mess that we've gotten ourselves into.
It seems to me, and I'm a neophyte in all of this, but it seems to me the fact that the Russian delegation at the climate summit today was willing to apologize on behalf of all Russian people, essentially. The fact that there are as many protests out there that appear to be as successful as they are, and the fact that you do have two of the oligarchs, as you point out, publicly coming out against him, but a third one who appears to be confirmed by, I forget the news agency, I think I mentioned it earlier on the previous stream from today, but he's anonymous, but he says that, Putin is apparently in big trouble in there, and they're all wanting this to end. Is that a signal that we're on our way towards that end, or does he still have several tiers of protection before he has to be concerned?
He certainly has tiers of protection around him, but when you get enough influential people who are saying, no, this isn't the way it's going to work, and they're going to change it, then he can rant and rave as much as he wants, but it's all over but the shouting. I think one of the things that may be alarming some of them is that he's decided, we're going to a big nuclear alert state, and he's now threatening the use of nuclear weapons, and that's not a rational, sane man, because the consequences of that are just too horrific to imagine. And the people around him are going to say, okay, you've run your course, goodbye.
Speaking of that,
people need to...
Please, Xander. Yes, Xander, you're up.
Well, I was just going to say, everybody has to remember that when you start talking about using nuclear arms, it becomes a very curious game. It appears the only way to win is to not play.
Yes.
Question, sort of our thinking on that was based along the lines of something that you had suggested earlier. And by the way, I genuinely, we've said this before, I'm going to say it again, but I'll take this opportunity to add, we cannot thank you enough for coming to help us with this, because this is something that we're all kind of in the dark. But the our thinking was that this nuclear saber rattling, at least at the beginning, which the beginning was like 12 hours ago, but things are moving fast. At the beginning was essentially actually really as a distraction to his own people, that he was really trying to manipulate his own people, not necessarily terrify the rest of the world. If it terrifies the rest of the world, hey, great, bonus, but that wasn't actually the intended goal, at least not the primary goal. The primary goal is to manipulate his own people. Does that sound reasonable to you? Do you think what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, as I pointed that out when I mentioned it yesterday, day before, I don't remember.
I'm as
But
confused as you are.
I think that's the case. But again, it's another situation of he says or does something thinking it's going to have one effect, and it produces a completely different one. And increasingly what's happening is everything he's doing is spinning out of control before he can even analyze the repercussions of what he's doing or saying. And that's going to generate more and more fear and paranoia on his part.
I'd like to get the, I think I had the babushka video. Give me a second. I'm going to see if I can get that. I assume everybody knows what we're talking about. Now, this lady, actually, I have two images just to get things moving. We are going to talk about her, but this is...
sunflowers?
Yeah, the sunflowers.
That
lady.
That's cool.
Wow. So we're gonna get that up, but before we do, we're gonna put up this one. This is, and for some reason we only have the beginning of this clip. The rest should be on the Discord. So if you want to come catch that on the Discord, if I can get the rest, I'll play it. But right now it's not a huge priority. This is a farmer in Ukraine. Apparently, decided he was a little tired of this. So when the Russians had pulled over and gotten out of their tanks, this happened. And I'm sorry, like I said, that was a shortened version. You can also see the soldier who was driving the tank chasing the farmer, trying to catch up with it. He basically hooked his tractor up to the tank and stole it.
Bring my tank back!
Oh, dear Lord. They are not happy over there. Yeah. All right, I'm going to try to find the so-called babushka. Oh, dear Lord. It's not just about finding that video, though I do want to find it. I also got to find the translation, because that needs to be said. What were you going to say?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The other one that I think is interesting is the stories that are coming out of, I can't remember what they're called. They're called the Ukrainian grandmas or Ukrainian mothers or something. And as the Russians are being taken prisoner, they said, bring them to us. And so they bring them to these old ladies or these mothers, and then they use phone lines to call the soldier's mother back in Russian and say, do you know where your son is? Do you know what he's doing?
Yes.
And most of them are absolutely stunned to find out, A, my son is there, and B, what the hell do you mean we're invading Ukraine? So state media in Russia has been keeping a, steam kettle pressure valve lock on anything getting out to the population about what's going on.
What I find interesting about that, just as an aside, and I'm aware that I am an idealist, and I am an idealist to probably an unreasonable extent. But having said that, it's so tempting to say kill them all and kill anybody who's crossed the border. But here they are letting them call their families, and they are calling their families, and they're calling their parents, and the mothers and grandmothers are just sitting there lecturing them on, do you know what which makes me sit there and say, okay, in the U.S., if you're out late one night, and you get a call, it's like, do you know what your son's been doing? And it's a little different. But nonetheless, I'm sitting there going, that in and of itself is getting the word out, because these people are talking to their children, and they can recognize their children. They're talking to them on the phone and realizing that everything they've been told is completely false. And by letting these people live and talk. But I think there's a second element there that you need to understand, is that the Russian people are part of this tragedy too. They've had to live under this asshole for however long it's been. And Russia, if you didn't have somebody like that in charge, if you had a, reasonably legitimate government that was responsible to the people, they'd probably all be in much better condition, economically and socially and everything else with them. But instead, you have, we need to build more tanks and airplanes to threaten our neighbors. We have another one. This appears to be, we're going to put this one up, a Ukrainian armor personnel carrier that ran out of fuel a Ukrainian stops and offers to tow them, but so long as he tows them in the other direction. So we'll tow you back to Russia if you want. And they said no. And I said, okay, well, then you might as well just surrender because you got no fuel and all the other Russians are surrendering. So and I think these stories are not indicative of it. Obviously we've seen a lot of fighting. It's nice to be able to see something that in this kind of war zone is as lighthearted as it is. Again, if I can find the
Comedy relief.
oh yes, and then the drive-by Molotov cocktail.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've got.
I'm not sure how much actual damage that did, but it was a great visual.
I don't think it did a lot of damage, but it's just like they can't go anywhere without somebody just harassing them, which is, by the way, thank God. But yeah, so let me get the drive-by Molotov cocktail if I can get that one. Some of this is getting taken down pretty much as quickly as we can get it. Although a lot of people here have been working hard to snag this because we know it comes down, so we try to snag it well in advance of a show. I know I did download that Molotov cocktail one, so let me see if I can find that. Maybe Zandring, if you want to ask some questions while I load up some video, either Zandring or Mouty. Mouty, you are muted. There you go.
Zandring, actually haven't heard much of you, so if you have questions, I'd love to hear. If you have interesting questions. But I always have backup ones.
Well, that's good because it's like I'm still trying to catch up on the things that are the actually kind of a bit surprising the way this has gone. It's like when they first decided they were going to invade Ukraine, we're like, oh crap, this isn't very particularly good, and how long is it going to take until they wipe out Kiev, and then suddenly here we are several days later going, wow, this isn't really going very well for them. They really kind of flubbed this up pretty massively, and good on the Ukrainians for not rolling over and giving them hell. And so yeah, it's and now suddenly because it's not going so well, it's like the rest of the world has actually had time to act, and the rest of the world's actually standing up and saying, hey, this really wasn't a great thing to do, and you should really not do this. So I'm still trying to catch up because I'm in the middle of moving, so it's like I'm not tied into anything at all. I'm packing boxes with stuff and deciding what stuff that I've collected over the years has to be thrown away versus what I can take to my minuscule little room that I have to move my stuff to. So it's like I'm lost and just trying to catch up.
Well, we appreciate you coming to hang anyway. Tell you what. But what I was going to say, a question that I have that maybe you can chime in on, or Commander McMullen, is the idea that there seems to be some incongruency between the way that Putin talks about Ukraine as like a brother state, it belongs to us, and what I understand is how Ukrainians and Russians feel about each other, and the idea that he will do anything to win. So I guess the incongruence for me is, if you were to do some carpet bombing, or if you were to do if he were to cause destruction to Kiev, as I understand it, which is like the heart of Russian nationalists, or like the history of Russia, and how do you deal with that juxtaposition of it's our country, we don't want to bomb our own country, I will do anything to win. The Ukrainians and the Russians see each other as brothers. I will do anything to win. You see where I'm going with this?
Oh yeah.
Okay, what do you think?
Well, you see that throughout many countries in the area. I mean, how many little dictator-type countries have all said, oh, this is, our wonderful country, and then turn around and bomb parts of it because that group is on the outs or needs to be controlled, we see that happen all the freaking time. So that's not particularly surprising that Ukraine was a fairly important part of the USSR, so, wanting or having that lingering idea that that should be still part of Russia doesn't surprise me either, because it's got a lot of economic benefits to it. But carpet bombing it and if he actually says that's it, I am not stopping, period, I will win this if I have to raze it to the ground. You have to really, that's just a matter of pride, or I just lost the term I wanted to use. That's just astounding, because
social psychologists call that honor culture. Like he is raised in very deep into an honor culture, as
Yeah.
what social scientists would call it.
Yeah, and it's completely self-defeating. It's like, okay, so you're just going to start bombing any kind of resistance and just destroying everything in your path. It's like, what would be the point of trying to bring Ukraine into Russia at that point? Because it's not going to provide you with the kinds of benefits that it would have before. Like, had it all gone down the way that I think that Putin thought it would, and that they'd be able to use surgical strikes, take control of things, take control of the ports, be able to move their columns into position along the Central River, be able to actually take fairly positive control of the country with minimal resistance, it would have been super beneficial to Russia at that point, even with the blowback of the rest of the world, because he would gain all of the benefits of all of the different parts of Ukraine that he wants, and he can kind of sort of ignore those parts that he doesn't want. But that's not what happened at all. I mean, this went so sideways, and rather quickly too. So it's like, I've had lots of people talking about the kind of person that Putin is that he just doesn't simply back down at all. And it's like, okay, well, now he's painting himself into a corner where there's no option here at all. I mean, nothing. He can't win. He can't pull out. So now what? It's like a immovable force meet unstoppable object. What the hell is going to happen now?
Well, you get a Gotterdammerung scenario. It's like Hitler in the bunker in Berlin in 1945 of, the Germans were not worthy of me, so they must all perish.
Yeah, that's let's hope that he doesn't go that far.
I can't have you, no one can have you.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
That's some petty bullshit right there.
Yeah.
Well, it's not only
And you have to be really careful about that.
Well,
Because if you truly ended up in that kind of situation again, like had World War II Germany been a nuclear armed country, that would have been a catastrophe for all of Europe. Europe probably would cease to exist because he'd have just launched everything at that point. It's like, and you wouldn't want to get Putin into that kind of position if he's that kind of person. I mean, that would be a terrible catastrophe.
Well, he's such a narcissist that he has to view everything from the perspective of he is the center of his own universe. And the fate of anybody around him other than himself doesn't really matter as long as he gets his way. He's the classic 3-year-old throwing the temper tantrum because mommy won't buy him Cocoa Puffs.
What do you feel about the idea that I heard that as good as he is at political strategy, he's horrific at war strategy?
The real question is, who formed the war strategy? Was that something that came out of the general staff? Or was it something that came out of, the presidium, so to speak? I don't really know how to call that. The decision of, the strategic decision, if you will, of let's invade, that was a colossally dumb thing, as we're seeing now. But in terms of, we're going to use these 3 columns and attack in these directions and so forth, I don't think he has a lot of influence on that. I'm sure his advisors came to him with the traditional plan A, plan B, plan C. One of them is a throwaway. The other one is the obvious. Well, it's not really good enough, but we know it.
What you're doing. So it's 3 alternative force choice, but it's really 1 alternative force choice with 2 bullshit answers.
Kind of, yeah.
There was there's an argument that's been made and appears to be gaining credibility, and I want to discuss it, which is that actually he would not have tried this under Trump. Now, the argument that I've made in the past, and I'm open to being wrong, is he wouldn't have tried it with Trump because he didn't need to try it with Trump. But the argument that
Trump was doing him all the favors.
Yeah, Trump was handing everything. He was getting everything he wanted and needed from Trump anyway. There'd be no point.
He was trying to dismantle NATO.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
He was preventing Ukraine from having the defense weapons that it wanted. He was doing Putin's bidding.
And
How do I spit that sentence out?
I mean, he was removing the sanctions. He was getting, so there'd be no point. But the argument that seems to be gaining some traction is he would actually have been terrified to do it because Trump is so unpredictable. Trump may have, committed a huge ground force and just been completely unpredictable in that front. What are your thoughts on either line of reasoning?
Unpredictability, yes. The likelihood of him going against his big daddy, no, I doubt it. I mean, you got to remember, much of the Trump business empire has been shored up by Russian money, between organized crime and oligarchs renting floors of his hotels, nobody ever staying in them, but, hey, here we're giving you legal money to finance yourself. And yeah, I can't see him biting the hand that feeds him like that.
Well, and we're also learning.
Yeah, I think it's.
Please.
I think it's the what we call essentially the impossible hypothetical. It's like why are we spending time thinking about something that would never have actually happened?
I do want to. I don't want to change. I do have the babushka up there, so I'll put that up in a minute because I think it's worth hitting. But I want to try to wrap up this a little bit. We are also learning, and we're trying to get sort of a bigger handle on this. But when after 9/11, one obvious problem was that Saudi Arabia had invested a lot in the U.S., a lot more than most people were really aware of, and a lot more than I think anyone had really been sitting down and tabulating. Now, it was not the Saudi Arabia government that was responsible for the attacks. It was bin Laden, who was essentially a Saudi prince gone rogue and wanted them dead as much as anybody. But fearing that the U.S. couldn't make that distinction, it was the any involvement, even ancillary involvement from Saudi Arabia, was redacted as much as possible, and we started to realize just how much investment Saudi Arabia had done in the U.S. Well, we're starting to learn how much investment was done in industry, specifically aluminum is one of the ones we've been talking about in the U.S., and how much they've been investing in helping the U.S. recoup jobs, but in a way that makes it much harder for us to sanction them because of that investment. I was curious if you could opine on that at all, the sort of foreign investment by Russia in the U.S. as we're learning more and more, specifically by many of these oligarchs, and also in BP, which of course came out just recently.
Who are you asking?
I'm asking you. I get to ask my questions like this whenever I want, and it's just I call them up and say,
Okay.
And that potential listen, it's great. I usually call him up around 4 p.m. when I can't sleep, and I'm just like, listen, I can't sleep.
Yeah, you don't want to hear my answers to these
answers?
questions.
I know that the Russians are heavily invested in this country and have been increasing that level of investment for quite some time, because return on investment within Russia is pretty poor. So you invest in the big economy that allows anybody to invest. You may need a little assistance in laundering the money because of restrictions against foreign investment here, but it's easy to get around those rules if you know the right people.
Yes.
And I can't speak to specifics, but I know from some of my previous work that there was definite Russian organized crime involvement in a lot of front businesses in this country. So legal businesses were basically being purchased and operated by Americans to support Russian organized crime.
We do have a lot of great questions. Thank you. So what I think we're going to do is I'd like to start getting to some of these questions. There's one in particular I'm looking to answer. So if Marty, you don't mind fielding those in a second. But before we do, I do want to do the babushka thing. So she's being called the babushka. I had the translation up. I also want to. I got the other half of that footage. You can find all this and much more on our Discord. I hope you'll consider joining. And we're just having these discussions on the Discord and covering all of this that we can. But here is... Oh, that's right. That's probably because I moved. So let me, I want to get the text of the babushka up on my screen again. And I just want to make sure, no, I'm in the wrong spot for that. So let me get that back up. So before I do that, this is the second half of the video, Farmer Steals Tank. Actually, let's just put that up full screen. Boom, right there. And oh no, I'm sorry, that's the babushka video. Where's the other half? Here's the other half of Farmer Steele's tank. So there you go, the lighter side, as it were, of war. And then the babushka, she's being called the babushka, means grandmother in Russian. She went up to a bunch of Russian soldiers and offered them sunflower seeds, but her motives were interesting. They weren't poisoned or anything, but she had an interesting motive. And what I'd like to do is I do want to find the translation of this. I had it a second ago, and I'm sorry to say I clicked off, so I don't have it anymore. Unless somebody else happens to have the translation handy, I can get back to the babushka. We may also just play it. Well, no, we should have the translation. I have the loose translation from memory. I may just go with that, and then we can start to do questions. Yeah, let's do that. So this is the babushka. Let's get her up in here. And she is offering sunflower seeds to the to Russian soldiers. Here she is. So loosely translated, what's happened here is she's gone up to them and offered them sunflower seeds. They have said, would like to leave. You're kind of interfering. And she goes, well, are you Russians? And she said, yeah. She said, well, we don't want you here. Here, sunflower seeds. And they said, well, no, we're not going to take the sunflower seeds. And she says, well, if you put them in your pockets, then when you die, you'll be, planting seeds for Ukraine, and we can all remember you through the new sunflowers. So take these sunflower seeds, eat them. It'll be great.
I got it.
And
I got the translation right here.
Perfect. You want to read that?
So real quick, I'll try to. I'm not going to do voices, but the woman asking, "Who are you?" The soldier asks, "We have exercises here. Please go away." And the woman says, "What kind of exercises? Are you Russian?" The soldier says, "Yes." The woman says, "So what the fuck are you doing here?" Soldier says, "Right now our discussion will lead to nothing." The woman says, "You're occupants. You're fascists." Wait, is this the same thing? Yeah, it is.
Yes.
What the fuck are you guys doing in our land with all the guns? Take these seeds and put them in your pockets, so at least sunflowers, Ukrainian national flower, will grow when you all lie down here. Soldier, right now our discussion will lead nowhere. Let's not escalate this situation, please. Woman, what situation? Guys, put the sunflower seeds in your pockets, please. You will lie down here with the seeds. You come to my land. Do you understand? You are occupiers. This is the most mafia sounding shit. I love it. Soldier says yes, and the woman goes, "And from this moment, you are cursed. I'm telling you. I spit on you and the blood of your family. Tuh, tuh, tuh." And the soldier says, "Now listen to me." And the woman goes, "I've heard you." And the soldier goes, "Let's not escalate the situation. Please go this way." And the woman goes, "How can it be further escalated? You fucking came here uninvited, pieces of shit." Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
That's it. That's your So that is the translation. That is accurate, and this lady is now being hailed as and it takes some balls to go up and talk to a Russian psychopath, and they're not all that. I think.
By the way, I got that from Dorito. I did not find that myself. He threw that into my DMs.
Thank you, Dorito. That is the translation, and that is it's worth noting. It's tough. I get very angry at all Russians when this happens, and I think what Commander McMillan pointed out is they are also actually very much in most cases a victim as well. Most of these soldiers are not particularly well trained. Most of them are terrified. And kudos on that soldier for not shooting her, because under any other set of circumstances, that must have been tempting. So we're going to toss this off to Maury for a little bit. I'm going to try to sort some more video. So I'm actually going to, I'll be here to answer questions too. But I'll pass this off a little bit more to everybody else. There's one question on, I think it was Trump financing I would like to definitely get in on. But other than that, Maury, the floor is yours.
Well, the people in the chat have been blowing up not only responding to the things that we're asking out loud. Like in the process of saying things, we're kind of like rhetorically asking things that they are answering, and they're also making comments, and they're also asking questions that I think it would be fun to throw to the two of you, as Andrew, if you're still here, and Commander McMullen. So let's see. I don't want to go too far back, but around 19 minutes ago. The Ukraine rep at the UN handed out contact information for a hotline that Russian parents can call to find out if their sons died in the war, since Russia may never actually admit as much. So that was just a comment by Vodka Not B67, which I think is interesting. And of course, feel free to comment while I'm looking for the other stuff.
I'd heard that too.
Okay. Bragwin opinion. Remember, for nearly a generation, the Russian army has been cutting their teeth on weak opponents, so they had no idea what to do with stiff resistance.
I'll interject with a thought here that's been kind of poking at me for a while. In a lot of ways, to me, this is reminiscent of what happened when the British provoked the war with the Zulus and lost the Battle of Isandlwana. Not the one everybody knows, the movie Zulu, which is Rorke's Drift, but that was a sideshow, if even that. But the major battle, the attack column that the British were sending in, was massacred by the Zulus. And the British were just taken aback. They literally could not believe something like that could happen. You know, these are a bunch of African savages. How can they defeat a modern army with breech-loading rifles and breech-loading artillery, etc., etc.? It's like, I'm sure that's kind of the mindset that's going on here is, how can a second-rate nation like Ukraine be giving us such a hard time? This is impossible.
Story of the underdog.
Yeah.
Well, and
beware the defenders of their own families and property and country.
Amen.
They got a little bit more to fight for.
Well, and it looks too like, there was a number of miscalculations. It looks like he actually did intel beforehand, and there was dissatisfaction with the government. But there's a difference between being dissatisfied with your current government and being dissatisfied with the entire system of government. And Putin may have mistook one for the other. Yeah, and then there was
it'd be like thinking that, we can evade America because of what was going on with Trump, and not realizing that, everybody just hated Trump. It's not that they necessarily hated our entire country, and we're just going to let you walk over it.
I did want we got a super chat. I just want to hit this real quick. It's Discovering Ancient History with Pat Lowinger, $2. Pat, thank you so much. Pat has always been really a very big supporter of this channel, and not really in terms of super chats, but in terms of just making sure that we're always well informed, dropping in to help us out when we need info, because he always has his knowledge of history is really unparalleled, and also just helping us connect with good guests. So thank you so much for your continuing support, Pat. We really appreciate it. There was something I wanted to add in a comment, but I think probably better to go on to new comments if we've got them, and if I remember something, I'll go back to it.
Interesting bit of supposedly breaking news. U.S. retired General Michael Flynn has come out and said Putin's invasion of Ukraine is entirely justified, as Russia was being threatened by the Ukrainians.
If Flynn said that, I honestly wouldn't be surprised, but holy fuck.
Yes.
Well, he's getting fucking nuttier than a
Christmas cake.
Yeah, it's just the shit that he says anymore. He seems completely unhinged.
I hope he's
said that. Shit dribbles out.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back to some of these comment questions, because there's actually quite a backlog, and I want to be able to get through them. So Bragwin also said, the crowd says, quote, "But Ukraine was once part of Russia. Why are they fighting? Doesn't remember that Alaska used to be a part of Russia. Would they like to hand Alaska back too?" So I think I saw that in a meme form.
Yeah, there was a meme, and there is, and we haven't been reporting on this because there's been other things, but there actually is a reasonably large contingent. It's a minority, but it's not trivial. in the U.S. that thinks that Russia is justified in this, and that is staggering.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I don't know if either Zandring or Commander McMillan there have any comments on that, but that's a little frightening in my view.
No, I've heard some people making comments to that effect. You know, it's the worship of a strongman authoritarian.
It's such a 180. It's such a complete 180.
Yeah.
From the ones from the same party that ostensibly was saying that liberals were just basically wanting to hand the U.S. over to communism, socialism, and to Russia, and it's like, moving towards easy, trite phrases that lack nuance, and just we can sit there and paint our political enemies in this brush, and it's like this is something that should be uniting everybody. I'm a little surprised, but it is what it is. All right. Anyways.
All right, another comment. There's a reason there's mostly green boys in the Russian army. Green meaning noobs. All the old soldiers would tell Putin to go fuck himself personally. That was again from Bragwin. Can't be rich if you're dead. Burned water. Mike H. This war strategy was made by generals that were afraid to address the true capabilities of the Russian forces with Putin, which I would assume means that they were overestimating it.
Well, yeah, we've heard that, and we've had now multiple confirmations, including the third oligarch who is anonymous, but has said that Putin ripped everybody a new one, saying that he had been told lies about the actual capability of the Russian army, and the consensus is, yeah, that's what happens when you surround yourself with sycophants who are just yes men and are afraid that you'll kill them if they say something that you don't want to hear. He was not accurately told really what the capabilities and the morale was. Is that? Well, any thoughts?
I want to interject on that one.
Please.
The Russian army in the past, I would say, 10 to 15 years has undergone a major upgrade transformation in certain parts of it. So, I hate using that phrase, but I do all the time. I'm sorry. Think of it as like in the English Civil War, and you get Cromwell forms the new model army. Well, the Russians kind of did that. They took a few elite units, gave them the best equipment, gave them the best training, actually formed something that resembles an actual NCO Corps for low-level leadership. Those are a major upgrade to their forces. It doesn't mean that they're even close to, say, NATO forces in those regards, but the key is that they are better than the old standard Soviet-era Russian army. And so when somebody goes to Putin and says, yes, the army is significantly improved, it may be that he's simply misinterpreting what that means. He thinks it's like, oh, significantly improved, we can walk over NATO tomorrow morning and be in Paris by nightfall. Yeah, dude, that's not what I was saying.
Yeah, we're already perfect, more improved than perfect, superhuman powers.
Yes.
Do you think he was motivated, or not motivated, but do you think he was influenced by the success of the Taliban in Afghanistan after our evacuation? Nobody thought they could take it. U.S. intelligence said it would take them 6 weeks, and it took them fewer than that many days.
6 hours.
Yeah. Do you think that influenced him? He said, "Oh, hey, wow, this it could be easy now to just walk over other countries," or?
The key, I think, with that situation is that it's not U.S. or NATO forces that are defending the place. It's Afghan national forces who just all kind of looked at the writing on the wall and said, nah, I ain't playing this game. I'm going home. So I don't think you can misread that situation if you actually have any actual real information about what was going on. But from a strategic level, in terms of American will, and that's the level that he's playing at. He's not playing in the operational level. Putin's playing at the strategic level. He's looking at it saying, American will has failed because they pulled out, and as things were going to hell, they didn't go back in and rebolster their puppet regime. And I don't think he understood that wasn't what we intended to do at any point. The whole idea was, we've been there long enough. If it isn't going to fix itself by now, why are we throwing good money and good lives after bad?
I have a question from the chat. Do you think that, and it's up right there on the screen, but do you think that the Russian soldiers were aware of what they were doing in the Ukraine? And if so, to what extent?
Reporting that's coming out, and again, it's all apocryphal. It's, people just talking about what they've said. Many of the Russian troops that went in were under the impression this literally was an exercise. This was not an actual invasion. This was just war games.
Jesus. Well, and at least some thought, too, that it was humanitarian, right? That they were going in to protect the newly formed republics in the Donbass region. And so at least some ostensibly thought that.
But when you're driving up from the Crimea or coming down from Belarus, you can't really say you're helping defend the Donbass and Luhansk.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, they're not particularly close to that area. Well, I can say, having been through an area where we initiated an actual war, not being in the leadership and being privy to what the admirals are all talking about or being told from home, that, and it may be a little bit different between the Navy and ground forces, Army types, but we didn't have a damn clue what was going on. We had no idea. We were being told what to do, where to go, and that was pretty much it. They did not tell us what was going on as like, oh, by the way, we're going to start bombing this area. You're going to load these things up. We're going to give it to the aircraft carriers. The aircraft carriers are going to load up planes. And we actually learned more about what was going on by watching CNN on television than we were being told what was going on. So, and that's an active war. We started a war in Afghanistan. And I was right there for it, and we had no idea what was going on. So, they just don't give you that kind of information, the lower kind of grunt troops. Now, the people in command that were moving all of those troops, they should have had at least more of an idea, and that might be where that was coming in. Hey, these are exercises, not a real thing. You're going to move your troops into here. So they may not have been told what was really going on either, and have been just said, you need to go here, do this, and okay.
That's also an element of command climate and command relationships. If you have a good CO or XO, they're going to keep you briefed on what's going on to the best of their ability without, violating confidentiality and classification levels. And we used to do that when I was on my ships routinely. The CO would get on the announcing system and tell everybody what was, going on. But in a very highly centralized system, military system like the Russians have, I can totally see that no officer mentioned to an NCO what was going on, and no NCO knew enough to tell any of the enlisted people below him what was going on. It was all complete mystery to everybody, and oh wow, we're in Ukraine. What are we doing here?
Dear Lord. All right, Marty's got to bounce pretty soon, so I'd like him to at least ask one more question and then make any final comments he wants to make, and I'll take over the questions. We were asked about this footage. This is a Ukrainian Air Force. It's a drone strike from one of their Turkish TB2 drones striking a column that has pulled over and seems to have already suffered some losses. That's what we're looking at. Anyways, please, Marty, any last stuff you want to hit?
Well, I don't have any questions beyond the stuff that I already asked from the chat. I just want to make sure that the people who are watching, who are asking things, have an opportunity to be engaged and to have connection with the panel, because they obviously are listening to what's being said, and if they want to get involved, we want to give them an opportunity.
If I could see a stream of questions, I'd be happy to address them, but all I see is your beautiful face.
Hey. You're welcome.
And I'm happy.
Oh. All right, listen. I honestly, I don't mind what the two of you discuss off air in your spare time, but while we're live,
Listen.
if we could make some semblance of professionalism, that would be appreciated.
Oh, it's always good to have a good laugh. All right, I'm off.
Dear Lord. All right.
Everybody
Thank
have
you.
a fantastic week. Man, make the best of it of what you can, and keep watching In Time for the news. Peace.
Thank you. That was Christopher Mowdy, occasional guest host, who we always appreciate his input. So there was a question that I really also wanted to address, and I'll try to catch up on the questions. He was ahead of me on those, but I will try to catch up there. But there was a question about how does this bode for Trump, and that I think may be interesting because Trump is in trouble with the Deutsche Bank issue. It looks like he's going to get hit by the Southern District for RICO violations and or money laundering. Leaks out of that office says that they're looking at racketeering, which is RICO. So yes, I'm aware that I did just, but for people who don't know what RICO is, I'm aware I did just repeat myself. But now the only thing that I thought of was this may actually be of some benefit to him because it makes it harder to get witnesses and it makes it harder to actually try to trace the money because now you can't communicate with the Russian banks anymore, and now. It's much harder, I assume, not that you could ever really issue a warrant in Russia, but it's much harder now to actually get businesses, to get not intelligence from businesses, get evidence from businesses who have now been forced to sever all ties with Russia. Is this going to help him? Is this going to impact him in any way? What do we know about Trump's legal problems as a result of all of this? We'll start with McMillan and then Xander if he's...
I honestly don't really follow that side of the equation very much. I do think a lot hinges on what his comments are specifically about what's going on. And if he steps in it by saying, oh yeah, the invasion was completely justified and I applaud my good friend Vladimir for doing this thing to these horrible Ukrainians, I think he loses a lot of credibility, even among conservative voters.
Right, and then I do want to get his answer on that, but just a correction. Yeah, so babushka is Jesus, it's actually pronounced babushka. Is usually an old lady or a Russian grandmother or a grandmother type of. But yeah, all right. So then there's the anonymous stuff I'd like to get into. I don't know how much of that is real. It's very hard to tell, but it looks like anonymous. Oh, Jesus, you don't want to piss off anonymous.
Oh, that's for sure.
Oh, dear Lord. But is Xander, any thoughts?
I hate when I do that. I go to talk and suddenly it's like I just inhaled all the coffee that I drank. You wait until I'm taking a drink to ask me a question.
That's why I ask that you have the camera on, even if we're not putting it to the front. I'd like to time.
That's what that is all about.
That's what that's about.
I find it a little concerning that there's a not insignificant group of people, unfortunately, mostly on the right, that believe that Russia is justified in invading Ukraine and handling its business because NATO's been threatening it with. By trying to get Ukraine into that whole thing, it's like how far over backwards do you have to bend to try and justify one nation invading another nation? It's like I don't see how that's justified at all. It's not like Ukraine was aiming rockets and shooting them into Russia. So
and
the fact that Trump coming out and trying to support that. I think that he's floundering a bit, and I think that there's a small contingent of hardcore supporters that are still trying to push him, but I think he's slowly alienating them. So it's like there's different layers of almost cult-like following, and the top layers are beginning to get peeled back, and he's just slowly shedding. And the fact that he can't really be relevant about anything is helping with that as well. So I think hopefully soon he will just be fondly remembered as the Marmalade Mussolini, and we'll kind of chuckle that was a real thing that actually happened in history, and move on with something a little bit more rational.
Well, I did forget to mention this. I had wanted to put this in the rundown, but international news. It was at about 1:53 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It was announced that Trump won CPAC's straw poll for the Republican nomination for the next cycle. DeSantis came in, I guess, second, if I'm understanding this correctly. If you don't include Trump, DeSantis had 61% of the vote. If you do, Trump won. So it's a straw poll, it's CPAC, but it's influential. So, yeah.
That's disturbing. The hell are the Republicans doing? Put their head out of your ass. We tried this once, didn't work. There's been many times where liberals have come up and said, no, we need to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, the system is broken and it's clearly not sustainable and we certainly need to do something or it's just going to collapse. And it's like we can't seem to agree on what the best solution would be for fixing this issue. It's like I think that less government involvement, et cetera, because I am governmentally very conservative and fiscally. And you're just like, no, we need more government. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to do something. And for the sake of breaking our impasse about what a proper solution is, let's give it a try. Let's try it. And if it works, great, then we've solved the problem. If it doesn't, then you at least need to be willing to recognize that things are getting worse, not better, and that we need to be able to change course. As long as you're willing to do that, I'm willing to support you in your effort to try your plan. I don't think it will work, but let's give it a shot because something has to change. It's like we're not going to get a different result until we start doing something different. And I don't believe that people are remembering that. It's like we've tried this; it didn't work. It actually, had a lot of really bad things happen. So we need to really recognize that we don't want to try the same thing again and expect it to have a different outcome. You need to learn, and I don't think a lot of people really care to learn.
Too many vested interests.
Well, especially in politics, right? I mean, I think what happens is, the goal of the job of the politician really becomes to get reelected. That becomes their job. The amount of fundraising they have to do, I forget what it is, but it's something like the average congressman from their first day in office has to get an average of $1,000 in campaign finance every day. And that's a lot of shaking hands, and that's a lot of going out and raising money, and not a huge amount of actually working at what ostensibly your job is. Their new job is to get elected, and that also means trying to not do the legislation that's most likely to do the most good, but the legislation that's least likely to be hanging around your neck like an albatross in 2 or 6 years, depending on which part of government you're in. And it's one of the downsides to our system. Our system is what is it? It's the worst system except for every other one out there. But so I think that was to steal from Winston Churchill, who also said, by the way, the best argument against democracy is 5 minutes with the average voter. Yeah. So there was a question, and we've answered this, I think, a few times before, both directly and indirectly, but it's worth answering again. I'd like to start with Xandring, actually, and maybe get him a chance to do his view on this, and then pass this question off to Commander McMillan. Why did Russia do this, and why now? So, Xandring, any thoughts? I know you were just drinking coffee.
No idea.
I totally saw that in your camera. He was just about to go, and I was just like, so Xandring, question. Please.
I have no idea what was running through his head. I mean, they were shaking about it. The only thing I can think of is that they wanted essentially the productivity and resources of Ukraine, and they weren't sure how they were going to get it. But it doesn't make rational sense to me the way that they went about it. And so I'm like, well, why now? I have no idea. It's like I said before, this stuff started really kicking off. It's like I wasn't really very knowledgeable at all about Ukraine or even the history of Ukraine in the USSR versus what's happened since the breakup of the Soviet Union. And it's like I've had to spend so much time trying to figure all that stuff out, and it's like I keep saying I didn't want to spend my last 2 weeks becoming an expert on Ukraine, and I'm still nowhere close to an expert. It's just like, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff that has gone on. It's an incredibly complicated part of the country with very complicated motivations and actors. And it's like, I have no idea why he decided it would be a good idea to try and invade Ukraine. Because it doesn't seem like it was ever a good idea. I mean, even if it worked the way that he thought it would, I still didn't see that as being a particularly good idea.
Yeah.
So, Commander McMillan, thoughts on that?
Well, I've been saying all along, I don't think this ever had anything to do with trying to seize resources or industry or whatever. I think there might be a case made for trying to secure the border regions and establish, or reestablish, I think would be a better choice of word, reestablish the buffer states that surrounded Holy Mother Russia. But I'm still fairly convinced that this is all about domestic politics inside Russia.
All right, we've had two other questions. So first of all, what does the Z stand for? And there's a list in the Discord what each of the letters stands for. There's a Z with a box around it, and they all basically represent where they came from. It's an identifier to avoid friendly fire, exactly. So they know what units they're looking at and where those units came from. The full list, I'll see if I can find it. It's on the Discord. That's also care of Bregwin, who sort of anticipated that question. I think I may have just blown right by it. Yeah. Z is the Eastern Regulatory Forces. Z in a square are forces departing from Crimea. O are forces from Belarus. V are naval forces, in other words, Marines. X is Chechens, and A is Special Forces. So that is what we're seeing. Now, we've discussed before the perception of Trump's, and then I think we're going to move off of Trump because this is not about Trump, but I think it's worth discussing because he is still, unfortunately, a factor in this. We've discussed before Trump's purported success in dealing with North Korea. So I want to kick this off first to Commander McMillan. Trump, especially right out of the gate when he first looked at it, he really seemed to be doing something that nobody had succeeded in doing, and it was the concept. Well, hey, Nixon was able to open up China in a way nobody else had before. Did Trump have? Trump appeared to have that huge success. Does he deserve credit on that front or not? And why or why not? If you don't mind my asking.
Well, I'll say this. Nixon opening up China is a success because the engagement with China continued past his presidency and continues into the present day. The engagement with North Korea didn't even last through the entirety of Trump's term of office. He tried, and while I don't think it was what he was intending to do, I still applaud the fact that somebody was willing to make that effort. I think it was something that was overdue, but it didn't succeed. So I don't give him that kind of credit for it.
Well, and in a number of cases, presidents of every party have tried to negotiate with Iran, with Russia, with North Korea, and with any so-called axis of evil that you'd like to toss onto that list. And usually it appears like there's progress pretty quickly, and then it gets walked back somehow, and we get back to exactly where we were when that president entered office. And that happened with that's happened with Clinton. That happened with Obama. That happened with both Bushes, although the first Bush is getting a little beyond my recollection. But it seems to be a pattern, and you can sit there and remember the success and say, well, they were successful. But if at the end it netted the exact same results as everyone else's attempt, at least that's my take on it. So I don't know if you have anything follow-up you want to do based on that, and then we'll kick it off to Xander and see what he thinks as our I was going to say House Conservative. I don't know. It's like a wine. Would you like to sample the House Conservative today? Yes, that's going to be. We're going to get the conservative view, but so McMillan, I don't know if that can. I'll cede to whatever it is that you. If you disagree with me, I'll cede I'm probably wrong, even if not your area of expertise. I think you still could. You've forgotten more about this stuff than I'll probably ever know, but. Anyways, that's my view. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yes and no. I think the difference is that when we negotiate with other countries, you try to establish a framework to build on. Even if you have a long relationship with a country who's an ally, if you're negotiating with them over something, you're still trying to build on that at a later point. And I never got the impression that there was any attempt to, or even attempt, let alone intent, to build on that with the North Koreans. I think it was just a wonderful case of, oh, look, PR, I can make some. Ta-da!
All right, is Andring, any thoughts on that yourself?
Yeah, when it comes to since we're talking about the House Conservative, there's a couple of different kinds of conservatives. You have interventionists and you have isolationists, and it really what your opinions would be on that kind of depends upon which camp you fall into. When it comes to that kind of foreign policy about the United States, whether it should be isolationist or expansionist, I'm not really sure. I haven't dug really into it, so I don't know yet what my real opinions are on it, because I don't know enough about the topic. But I do think that we need to decide which we're going to do, because it doesn't seem like we can ever figure out what it is. It's like sometimes we seem to be isolationist, sometimes we seem to be very interventionist. So I don't know if the United States even knows what it wants to do. But I happen to agree with Commander McMillan about Trump's. Oh, look, a PR campaign I can engage in. It's like I don't have any faith that it was a genuine attempt with North Korea to try and build something or bring them up or out. So I think it was just something to be taken advantage of. It was a great to be able to put in the press. Oh, look at what I've done. Nobody else has been able to do. There didn't seem to be much in the way of follow through with it. I mean, it just seemed like it was the flavor of the moment.
All right. Well, so McMillan, were you about to say something, sir?
No.
Okay.
I agree with Sandring.
Oh God!
The only thing I wanted to add to that is, if you say the conservative side of the aisle is got different flavors, I would argue that that's probably double the value on the left side of the aisle.
I've definitely seen lots of very, very liberal people, like bordering on, let's go ahead and try socialism again, left, that are very, very isolationist. They're like, let's stop involving ourselves in the rest of it. And then there's some I've seen that are like, no, we need to have a good presence out there. Which let's get out there and spread the good news of liberating freedom and women's rights. And so people are everywhere on this topic, and I think that's one of the reasons why it doesn't seem like we have a particularly good national identity on whether we're going to be more isolationist, let's keep to ourselves and run our country as a good example to the rest of the world, versus, let's spread our influence absolutely everywhere. I know a lot of people benefit from the United States spreading its influence everywhere, applying pressure and not doing so in particularly nice ways around the world, and then complain that the United States is exerting pressure in not particularly nice ways around the world. So, I think that the average person doesn't have any clue what the United States is actually doing and the kinds of both economic and political force that it applies around the world to get good deals for itself, which then the people benefit off of, and then complain that we're doing it.
All right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make one final word on Trump just because this came in and it's way off topic, but I think it's important. I'll say this, and then we're going to get right back on the topic. I'll do a brief rundown of what we've been talking about tonight, and I think we're probably going to try to wrap this up in about 10 minutes. I don't know that there may very well be breaking news, and if there is, we'll go to it. We're anticipating quite possibly some very large strikes later tonight, and we'll go to it if and when it happens, and if we're available. But somebody said Trump was tough on China, and I think they deserve some credit for that. Well, first of all, to the best of my understanding, that didn't really generate any results. That did cause a lot of problems. I'll also add that one of my biggest complaints about Trump was a complete lack of the ability to go beyond what his gut says and to actually look at nuance. He took one look at the TPP and saw one very important truth about it, which was it was a terrible trade. Not terrible, but it was... As far as trade deals go, it was very mediocre. And in that sense, it is a terrible trade deal because we should be getting trade deals that are beneficial, not mediocre. A mediocre trade deal is a net deficit. He took one look at it and saw that in it, and he was right. What he failed to recognize was it wasn't a trade deal. The TPP was never a trade deal. It wasn't supposed to be a trade deal. It was the way that we were going to stop the infringement on intellectual property rights against the United States and actually get real leverage for the first time in history against China. The reason is because we cannot... so McMillan probably understands this better than I can, so I'd like to hear him. He'll maybe be able to clarify and add a bit more. We cannot, without declaring war unilaterally, isolate China. We can't sit there and say, well, because, we're all going to just stop trading with China and get every other country to stop trading with China and try to influence our will in that way. It's an act of war. We cannot do that. We cannot embargo them unless it's part of a trade deal in which what happens is when China violates the intellectual property, for example, and this was just one element of it, of any one country, all the other countries are obligated to stop trading with them. And then all of a sudden, instead of the U.S. saying, well, hey, you're stealing our intellectual property and making all this money, and by the way, cyber attacking and stealing the Sony hack, all of these other things, instead of us having no power, all of a sudden we have completely isolated them because they were the only ones not in the TPP. That was actually a kind of a rather clever and subversive way to get massive leverage against China, and it would have worked. And what Trump did was he completely torpedoed the best chance we ever had of doing it, finally realized after 2 years why we needed it and tried to resurrect it and save face after that. But it is an irrefutable fact. He did not understand the deal. He didn't understand what was intended when the deal was made, and he completely destroyed any leverage we had with China, period, end of discussion. That's not even negotiable, and anyone who negotiates that didn't read the deal, didn't understand the deal, and didn't understand what he did. McMillan, what are your views on that?
Oh, I think you're 100% accurate.
And that's a fact, period. So you can sit there and say that he was tough on China. He was a clown when it came to China. I'm sorry. I think I cut you off there, but it's just like, I'm sorry. You don't understand the topic if you say that, but I'm sorry. Please finish, McMillan.
I was going to say, calling his actions with regards to that a clown, the actions of a clown, is insulting to clowns.
Yeah. Well, I think Mike H has lost credibility I think I like these questions because it's worth revisiting and it keeps me fresh on exactly what happened. But that was taking the call from Taiwan. Oh my God. It doesn't understand a thing. Okay. So where are we? Well,
the other,
please, Xander. Yes.
Well, the other thing is even if Trump had been able to follow through and do all of the things that he said that should be done, to get better trade deals with China, it's like the end result of all of those things that he was talking about in almost all cases was the American people were going to suffer more than China would. It's like, I want to impose tariffs on China. Okay, well, who pays tariffs? The people buying products in the United States pay those tariffs.
Yep.
It's like China isn't paying those tariffs. The people in the U.S. are paying those tariffs. So it's like it seemed like when it came to foreign trade or international trade that he didn't really seem to understand it. And I guess I can understand why he may not understand that. It took me a little while in digging and listening to several different economists to kind of get a handle on how international trade really works.
Yeah, but for a guy who's supposedly a graduate of the Wharton Business School, you gotta wonder.
Hey, I graduated from Princeton. I have a diploma on my wall from Princeton. So,
great.
Well, wait a minute.
You know, if you went to a business school, you'd think you'd understand basic international business concepts like that.
You would hope so, but you know, the point with my business or with my Princeton diploma on my wall is you have to read the fine print, because it's a natural horsemanship diploma from Princeton Community College from Princeton, British Columbia.
There you go.
Well, at least I can. Okay, so our no, I think that is that's the thing about Isandering, is he's obviously dishonest, and his credentials aren't what they say they are, and that's precisely why we have him. So we will get back to our Princeton graduate who is here helping us today in just a few minutes. I wish I'd known that sooner. I'd have been like, our Princeton grad is here, and he's going to school us all. But all right. So we're going to show this footage again. So I'm going to pause this. You can see some pretty startling footage in the middle right now, and we've gone over what this is before, and I don't understand any of it. But Isandering was able to recognize it, and I'm sure Commander McMillan can recognize it as well. I do want to show this. This was the detonation of the one of the largest, to the best of my understanding, conventional weapons available, and maybe Commander McMillan can explain it to us, but this is the detonation. It has not yet been confirmed, but the site's been found, and this video was actually recorded where that's a real place, and it appears that this actually did happen. This was yesterday, and if so, represents now the deployment of the single most powerful conventional weaponry in any arsenal today. This is that deployment. It looks like a mushroom cloud. It is a mushroom cloud. It's just not a nuclear cloud. We discussed how and why that, I think, last night. Mushroom clouds are not unique to nuclear explosions. They're unique to very hot explosions that get hot faster than the air insulates, and you create a tunnel and yada yada yada. But let's here's the clip.
Ох, ёб твою мать, нахуй. Давай. Ебал я его.
It isn't funny, but on some level, I'm sorry, I do get kind of this visceral reaction of, like, they see that and they're like, okay, we're putting the camera down and going fast in the other direction. So that has not actually been confirmed, but the more they look into it, the more it looks like that was actually deployed. So I would like to talk to McMillan about specifically what that weapon is. It does seem to be an escalation, and we discussed that at the beginning. And Commander McMillan, without putting words in his mouth, I believe, was suggesting that at this point, Putin will do just about anything to win, and that's a problem. Russia is clamping down on protests, clamping down on anyone who offers any support to Ukraine. There's a new law that calls that an act of treason with a 20-year prison sentence. This includes, but is not limited to, sending money, protests, anything like that. Meanwhile, Belarus appears to have dramatically doubled and even tripled down on assisting Russia. They have made a constitutional amendment now, or they've ratified their constitution to allow the placing of nuclear weapons on their soil, and they have offered to allow Russia to build a base and to house nuclear weapons of some kind on that base, which is obviously a staggering escalation. We also believe that they have prepared a large convoy of paratroopers to assault Ukraine. In fact, today our time, in the next 6 hours. We're keeping an eye on that. That's Ukrainian, it's both Ukrainian intelligence and the Kiev Independent, which is reporting that a Russian 276 transport is expected to take off full of paratroopers. Belarus does appear to have said at this point, and actually the Washington Post confirmed, that Belarus has committed now to a full air and ground campaign, which they had not been doing previously. So that's an escalation, at least on their side. I would like to get Commander McMillan's take on that in just a minute. We know that an increasing number of oligarchs and even the Russian delegation to the UN for climate change discussion, the leader of the delegation came out and apologized for the acts of his country. In this case, 2 oligarchs have come out publicly and said that the war needs to stop and there needs to be peace. A third one has reported that Putin has gotten angry and is essentially saying that he's been lied to by his own military. It is reminiscent of the movie Downfall, and in where the last days Hitler
Nine.
Exactly. That's it. It's an iconic, and the funny thing is too, it's become a meme, and it's a powerful movie. It was actually very controversial because it humanized Hitler, which I think absolutely has to be done. I'd much rather think of him as a monster that had nothing to do with the human race. But when you realize we're all part of that same machine in one way or another, it's terrifying. But it's the only way to kind of try to keep it from ever happening again. But yeah, he's sitting there, he's throwing the things on, and it's a meme now. Like, people insert events into it, and anything like, how can Justin Bieber possibly have won the Academy Award? And it was
Yeah.
Oh, those are hilarious. But and a number of those have been playing in circles that I'm familiar with recently. But at any rate, all that notwithstanding, there's a scene in it where he basically accuses all the commanders of lying to him from the beginning, of which there was maybe a little truth. But again, if you're going to... Now, he didn't execute his generals, to the best of my recollections. Now, Stalin did. But, if you're afraid that Hitler's going to, execute you, you're going to tell him what he wants to hear, less than what's necessarily accurate. At any rate... it does kind of look like what we're hearing is a little bit out of that kind of tone from that movie Downfall. I don't think we're going to play a clip from that right now. We've been demonetized enough for 1 week, but yeah, the U.S. Embassy and the French embassies are all telling people to get out of Russia and get out of Russia now. The thinking is that things are getting obviously awfully bad there. They may start interfering with American citizens in Russia. We do know now that there's a lot more protests there, and the protests are bigger than we were led to believe. We also are aware that as of this moment, at least Ukraine should have received a fresh new batch of fighters. It looks like their Air Force is actually still marginally intact, which is kind of a shock to everybody, and is still engaging. The Russians do not have air superiority, which they were supposed to have within hours of the attack, and they still don't have it. Poland has agreed to allow citizens to choose to volunteer and go in as citizens, not as members of Poland, to fight Russia and Ukraine. Volunteers from Estonia, Latvia, Poland, and Georgia have been crossing the border into Ukraine. The EU is sending, it looks like, about $1 billion worth of aid to Ukraine. The U.S. is, I think, if I recall, asking for $6 billion. Biden is from Congress. That will be taken up next week. Right now, the commander of the Ukrainian forces says that between conscripts, volunteers, and reservists, the Ukrainian army now has roughly 26,000 troops, which is significantly greater than the 1,800 invasion force. Nonetheless, Putin does appear to be desperate. He tried to take their second largest city, Kharkiv, yesterday. It got bad, and in fact, the reports are, too, that the Ukrainians were taking the signs off of the streets because they were basically going by streets. I mean, tanks were just going by, identifying by streets, and so they were either taking the signs off or actually switching signs to confuse the, oh dear Lord. But we read there was somebody who had done guerrilla warfare in Iraq, and he was talking about how to do it, and he said that's one of the things that you do. So it's unfortunately it's getting very bad down there for them, but there is, from what I'm seeing, the first light at the end of the tunnel. They are getting new supplies, they're getting trickling reinforcements, but reinforcements nonetheless from volunteers. Their numbers are up. Their morale is up. Russian morale appears to be extraordinarily low and falling. And Putin seems to be in a difficult position. If you really want to get the full rundown, it was about 5-10 minutes at the beginning of this episode. You can also learn more. Join our Discord. Come in, talk to us there. If you want to, liking the stream, really, we all hate to ask for that. It's sort of like, please like my stream. Please. Please like and subscribe, share with others so they can. We all hate to do that. We all hate to shill that. That's not why we joined YouTube. On the flip side, it helps us in the algorithm. It helps us get the word out there and helps us do what we're trying to do. So if you support us, please like and subscribe. It's also right now the only way when we go live. If you haven't hit the notifications button, you're not going to know, and you actually have to hit it. And you have to hit subscribe to all notifications because they're making that harder. And then when we have breaking news, you'll know. So do that. We'll go back to our regularly scheduled program, hopefully reasonably soon. We'll be doing guest interviews and all sorts of stuff. Would love to have Commander McMillan back on again sometime to not be like, tell us about war. But we'll, at any rate, join the Discord. You'll see we're really discussing it there. And so thank you for that. So that's sort of the short rundown. Like I said, maybe another little less than 10 minutes at this point. Make sure everybody can talk a little bit more, wrap up any questions. We're going to go down. I think everyone's going to try to take a break, but we are anticipating at this point, there was at last check another very large column heading straight for Kiev. If it attacks and if the paratroopers are intended for Kiev, we don't know where they're intended, but if it's true, if Belarus is entering the way, the Washington Post now confirms they are, and if those troops are real and going to be deployed, 5 a.m. their time, it's going to be a very difficult evening, I think, for Ukraine. So, and especially if they're using weapons like this. So, Commander McMillan, could you tell us briefly about the weapon that we just showed, and then about what you're sort of expecting us to see in the next 24 hours, and what, if any, light you see at the end of the tunnel?
Sure. The weapon you saw is a thermobaric explosive. We've used them ourselves. We used them in Vietnam, and essentially what it does is it turns gasoline or some other flammable liquid into an aerosol, and that aerosol mist disperses over a very wide area, and then the way we used to do it was a parachute flare would kind of slowly descend into that, and the moment it reached into the mist, it would ignite the entire thing all at once. It creates a huge overpressure blast. Anybody who's in the area will basically have the oxygen sucked out of their lungs and probably will die from that. It will knock over weak structures. It's not going to usually not knock over masonry buildings, but it'll knock out like sheet metal structures or wooden buildings. It will knock over trees. It'll take out any fields of grain or sunflowers or whatever you're talking about. And it's a good way to clear an area of infantry or like in trenches or something that you're having trouble taking out with regular artillery fire. This will probably kill many of those people.
Is it possible to classify this as a WMD, or is that you really can't say that with a conventional weapon?
You can't for a conventional weapon, and I wouldn't say this is that, but it's one of those weapons that there were enough ethical considerations about its use that we stopped using them and haven't used them, as far as I know, since Vietnam. I wouldn't classify it as the largest explosive. There are much bigger bombs. There's the famous mother of all bombs that we used to bunker bust in Iraq and such. Those are just standard conventional dumb bombs. It's just a very, very big one. But this has a larger area of effect simply because of how big that aerosol cloud is when it detonates. It's very similar to like a dust fire in a grain elevator. Same kind of concept.
All right, so no, this was not a Moab. This was the thermo. This was the thermo. What do you call this again? I'm sorry, I'm terrible with this name.
Thermobaric explosive.
Thermobaric explosive. All right. So it's essentially actually anti-infantry. Is that fair? Yeah,
it will do a number on, light-skinned vehicles and such. It may not destroy a tank or a heavy, infantry fighting vehicle, but unless they've got themselves buttoned up, it will very likely kill the crews.
Dear Lord. Okay. Yeah. So,
You can
what do
see.
yes, please.
You can see very small scale what these things do when you watch the kind of the Darwin Awards on YouTube, and you watch somebody who pours a whole bunch of gasoline over a big old bonfire, and they wait too long to actually get it. You know, they screw around, and then they decide they're going to light it.
Yeah.
And then it's like they can't get it to light, and then it finally lights, and you hear this whoop, and it's like the whole area, the entire thing explodes. You feel a pressure. Well, you can't feel it, obviously, watching, but you can see the pressure wave go out, and then it suddenly sucks all back right into the middle. I mean, you can see these on really small scales, and what it does on a large scale is terrifying. At least if you're a person, it's terrifying. If you're in a buttoned-up, sealed, APC, then you're probably going to be fine. But you don't want to be outside when that thing goes off.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and if they are even considering deploying that in a city, I think it goes without saying the casualties would probably be extraordinary. All right.
Yes.
So Commander McMillan, understanding what this caveat that I've given you before, I'm going to give it again. We are just sort of asking you for your educated guess and opinion as someone who has forgotten more about war than anyone on this panel. We obviously will mock you if you're wrong. We're going to be calling you up and saying, "Why did you say this?"
Good.
We're going to give you a hard time because we've done that in the past. That's who we are. But all joking aside, it's important to us, I think, to get educated guesses and opinions based on what we know. But they are just those opinions and guesses, and I think they have value so long as we are all crystal clear that that's what they are. But given that, I think they have value, and that's one of the reasons you're here, is because your opinions are better than what many people tend to claim as facts when they're out there talking about, we're at DEFCON 3, folks. It's like, you have no idea where we are on DEFCON. It doesn't even work that way. But
yeah.
So what do you think we're going to be looking at for, and I've asked you this before, and sort of roughly again, the next 6 hours, based on what we've heard about the possible, certainly a confirmed column. I'm going to show that again. This column headed straight to, and is right outside of Kiev, and we don't know what they're going to do. The purported paratroopers are preparing for an attack from Belarus. Belarus now engaging into the war fully. So what do you think we're going to be looking at for the next 6, 12, and then maybe 24 hours? Is there any continuing hope? Is it going to get really bad? What are your thoughts?
I think it will get bad. I think Putin and his high command advisors are going to realize that the political situation is descending into something they can't control any longer. So the window for trying to conclude this in a military fashion is rapidly closing on them. So I think you're going to see a redoubled effort on their part to accomplish their mission of taking Kiev and forcing a transition of government. It may be a completely farcical version of, swearing in the new president amidst, ongoing sniper and mortar fire or something, but that's something that may happen. But I think they're going to really make an extraordinary effort to take the city. I don't think you're going to see a lot of change within 6 hours. I do think that within 12, you're going to see the start of another offensive push on their part. And I think that you'll either see that push succeed or fail within 24 hours. They will reach their culmination of forward movement, or they will have taken the city center by that time. One of the two results. What happens after that, I think, is largely in the political realm rather than the military realm.
Do you find it credible? Please.
Go ahead. I was going to say, we know that the Russian military is experiencing fairly severe logistical problems. And that's why I think they've only got one more push available to them. before they have to pause for several days to bring up the supplies they need for another push. And those several days where they bring that stuff in also gives the defenders those days to improve their defensive position, bring in their own improved firepower. We've heard that so many of these European nations are sending military hardware and supplies to the Ukrainians, and at some point it becomes a fortified fortress that makes it very difficult for the Russians to actually get in and take Kiev.
All right, I do want to get Zandering's sort of answer to that, but I'm going to turn the camera back on, the internal back on. I think we've stabilized the signal enough so that it should be okay. But we've also got, I want you to see this. I'm sure you've seen this before. This is, nobody knows. Russia is claiming that it's anti-aircraft fired by Ukrainians that missed and struck one of their own buildings. Ukraine is suggesting that this was a deliberate strike by some form of artillery or rocket, striking an apartment complex. Last I'm aware, it was 6 injuries, no fatalities, but you can see the apartment is completely gutted. Ukraine is now, and we have to be a little careful because, of course, Ukraine can do propaganda too, and they're interested in it. They're interested in spinning this in any way that's going to help them. You can understand that, but they're saying that the evidence is now that they are targeting civilians more and more in an attempt to break their will and get them to surrender, because that's a win too. This is that attack. It's quite amazing to see a rocket hitting a apartment complex that way. Do you feel like you could opine on what this may have been, and if so, whether you can or cannot, what do you think is the likelihood that he is in fact targeting civilians, at least to the best of his ability, without getting caught doing it?
The fidelity of the picture is difficult for me to tell you what it is. I would guess, and I'm certainly no explosive ordnance disposal expert or anything, so I could be wrong. Probably I'm wrong, but I will simply say the kind of warhead used on a surface-to-air missile is unlikely to cause that kind of damage. Surface-to-air missiles today typically use what's called expanding rod warheads, which are an analogy to, it basically throws out sort of a chainsaw into the sky. It doesn't rely on a big explosion. And that's kind of what you saw going on there. It was a big explosion. To my thinking, that means it's either an artillery missile or an artillery shell that hit the building. And I don't see the Ukrainians, unless it was a complete misfire, mistargeting, dropping artillery onto their own buildings. So unless they're doing it for propaganda purposes, which seems counterintuitive. So I would say it's probably a Russian artillery strike of some sort against the city.
All right, Zandering, any thoughts on either that, because you two have far more experience in this area than I do, and or then afterwards your thoughts about in general what we're looking at in the near future, and any thoughts on this in general? I'm sorry, I was waiting until I've been freaking waiting, and you're not picking up the coffee. So I'm just like, come on, I'm stalling. Finally, we got to move forward with the show. So if you could drink a little more coffee.
He's not getting with the program.
I know. He's not a team player that way. Yeah. But
I'm feeling contrary tonight. Oh yeah. Okay, I just saw the missile strike there on the.
I can bring that back up if you'd like to see it.
Well, I just saw it on the because I can. It's moving on my phone screen I'm connected to, but it just popped up on the actual computer because I'm sitting at home on my wife's computer watching it, and so I've got a nice big screen.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I doubt that is a surface-to-air missile. Most of your anti-aircraft style, they rely on both kinetic and short-range. Kinetic strikes against things like missiles or other planes coming in, generally other missiles coming in. My best experience is with the Sea Sparrow missile systems because that's what the Navy uses. But there's several different kinds of missile systems stuck out there, but they don't generally blow up like that. So, I mean, maybe it is, and maybe it's just a bad angle or it hit a bad thing, but it seems a lot more like it's supposedly or a much more explosive round than a surface to air missile would be.
All right. Well, any final thoughts, Zandring, on before we wrap this up for tonight? Oh, you still there?
Must be drinking coffee.
Yeah. I may have. He
No,
thought he
the
could get
dogs
away with it.
decided that there was something of interest outside to bark at, so now they've taken off. Oh, it's because the wife just got home. That's why they're barking. So the dogs are going nuts. I've kind of given up guessing what's going to go on, because it's like every time you think you got a line on what's going to happen, and then suddenly it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. So I've kind of given up and just say, well, let's watch and see. You know, Russia's a bit limited in how much resources they can dump into this. So if they don't get some good traction and progress soon, they're going to have to pull back. So see what they do over the next 24 hours, or how things work out over the next 24 hours.
All right. Well, thank you both for all of your help. We're going to continue until there's an obvious resolution to this. I think we're going to continue our shows. The goal is 9 p.m. Eastern. They do fluctuate because we want to be as accurate as possible and make sure we've got the right information. And we will continue to do breaking news as anything big comes up. If you want to make sure that you get that breaking news, you have to like and subscribe and hit that bell. It also helps us, so win-win. But at this point, my hope is that everybody's got some rest, and we can. We're going to take a step back. If Belarus enters seriously, as we are anticipating, and if there is a serious push on either Kiev or Kharkiv in the next any significant period of time, we will, as soon as possible, go live and bring that to you. That we may be seeing. It seems like we're on the cusp of the worst fighting that we've seen yet, but we've thought that before and been wrong. So with any luck, we're wrong, and with any luck, the next time I'll be seeing you guys is in about 24 hours. We will be, as always, extending the invitation to Commander McMillan, who's been a huge help, and thank you, sir, again for coming. Thank you for everybody who has contributed in every way and has been contributions of all kinds. And I'd like to point out, I haven't had a chance to say this to the mods or to anyone else, but we've had a really decent number of people that some of whom I have known either from some time back or have sort of seen around, but didn't really know who they were, who've been hitting us up and saying, great coverage. And anybody who's familiar with the back end of how this works knows that this is a lot of work from a lot of people coming forward. And what you're seeing is the show after 5 people minimum, probably closer to 8 to 10, have really had a huge contribution to how this information gets put together. And we sit, we workshop it, we talk about it, and we go through it. And there's several vetting processes, and we still screw it up, as you can probably tell. But it's I wanted to let all of them know that I've gotten a number of compliments on it, and it belongs to everybody. And it's not can't pass all of it on. It's DMs and it's privates from what people are saying, but what I can, I'll make sure that you guys hear about. But between that and the support that the show's been getting, suggests to me that we're doing this the way that we've wanted to for quite some time, and the way we've done it in the past. We get better at it. But this is what we've always done. It's what we did during Black Lives Matter and when Iran invaded Iraq. We've done this before. We've done this before when World War III was trending as a hashtag, and it's a genuine privilege and an honor that people trust us to do it. So thank you to our viewers. Thank you to our supporters. We will hopefully not be broadcasting again until overtime tomorrow at roughly the usual time. Again, it's hard to say nowadays, but we're shooting for 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. And if there's going to be probably an attack on Kiev and on Kharkiv, and if it's what we've been seeing, we're going to leave it. You guys can find that anywhere on the interwebs. It's out there. If it's something that is unusual for some reason, we'll cut to that and we'll bring it to you. Thank you all. Thank you again, Commander McMillan, Zandring. Thank you, Maudy, for joining us earlier, and we will see you all tomorrow. Have a good night.
All right.